Hey, Stu, you made it.
Yeah, I found it with your bad directions.
Well, I wrote those directions specifically so that maybe you would miss it today, just in case.
You're
But
not
I
that
never get that
lucky.
lucky. I know. In any case, we're at Shapeshores. What do you think of the name?
I think it's a great name for
You do?
cover something that I think is very good. And you made it up, which is surprising.
Well, I was a little concerned because, a lot of students called up. We sent out the promo that we're going to do this. And they were kind of concerned that maybe Stu Barr is going to wear shorts. And I said, no, you do not want that nightmare. And so that we have to use their minds about that. So no shorts, and hopefully these will be very shapely episodes. With this. This is episode 1 of Shape. So it's from S.H.A.P.E Shifters, our group, right? And we were going to discuss pretty much what we're going to do in the next few episodes to describe what S.H.A.P.E Shifters is all about through our S.H.A.P.E short videos, right, at 15 minutes.
And how to change the structure of education from this basically categorical system of rigid subjects with no interconnection that, to be blunt, are boring.
Yes, it can be.
And we're going to put it together to tell how students, faculty, and others can come to the idea that human knowledge is not some separated, segregated bunch of subjects, but it's an integrated pattern that we would call education, which comes from the word to educate, which means to draw out.
Draw out,
rather
not
than
to
instruct.
Or instruct to insert, exactly.
Correct.
And one of the things about we discussed, we have about, 75 years collectively of teaching. And when
75.
we must be. And I only taught for 2 years. That means you must be at least 95.
Not bad for 95. When people tell me I'm 90, they ask my age, I say 95.
Well,
not bad, huh?
Now, technically, there's some issues with that. We all know that, but that's okay. We'll let students decide about that.
Okay.
But SHAPE stands for Science, Humanities, Art, Philosophy, and
education.
Education.
Yeah.
And we really do want to kind of shift perspective, right, in terms of reincorporating the humanities and the sciences
rather than
together,
humanities or sciences, which actually occurs from people in both subjects who want to separate them.
Exactly.
Humanities people often talk about not wanting to be in the sciences, and science people go, why would I do this?
I remember we gave our talks. We gave our talks around the country now about this, and the reception's been pretty good. That's why we wanted to do the shorts to get as many people involved as possible. There were the 2014 report by the called Heart of the Matter. I think it was 2014, and they indicated that for every dollar in STEM, only 7 cents was used for humanities. And so technically, we really wanted to introduce what we did in these 70 years collectively, basically. And we came up with the ideas of the Inspirational 6.
Yeah, I-6 on here, and we're going to cover those real quick today so that in our next one, we will deal with two
at a time. Right. So that will be 3 more episodes after this one, introductory. So let's talk a little bit about the I-6.
Okay.
Okay. And the first one that we came up with, when we talked about it, we said, what do we do in class? We didn't even know we were doing it. And we summarized.
Neither one of us knew.
No, we didn't. We knew content, and but we had something else was going on because we saw there was a great influence between the sciences and the humanities. You taught humanities. I taught science, physics, and mathematics. You taught philosophy. You got me to teach philosophy, which is the topic for another video. You jolt me into that one, which I love, by the way. And we analyzed our techniques and realized that one of the first things we did was to animate. We animated by bringing into place subject matter that was kind of animating the topic more than just presenting the topic. Not in an animated format, like cartoons and like that. We did it with our personalities and the way we brought the material to the classroom and broke that fourth wall, the wall between professor and student, got the students actively engaged. That was the first one.
Yeah, and the second one we did was to originate. And there you take old ideas and you modernize them. Try to make... I hate the phrase, actually, old ideas. There aren't any old ideas.
No.
There are human ideas.
Human ideas.
And so many of our ideas to illustrate to the student how many of these ideas have come and been rewritten, but they're basically the same stuff. We will go over various examples of how these have, and bring in the students. There's always been a drive to make things relevant. Well, it is relevant it doesn't matter whether it's 3,000 or 4,000 years old. That's
Absolutely.
a crazy
Absolutely.
idea.
That's one of the things we need to bring those connections forward.
We need to do
And
that.
that led us into the next one, was to rejuvenate. Rejuvenate to pretty much get the students' enthusiasm to go further and to learn beyond what we're going to talk about in class, because our goal was to generate skills of critical thinking and thought processes that are going to have them succeed at the next level, not at the level that they're at right now. We always wanted that to come forward. So rejuvenation was really most important to generate those connections, as you just said, between history, philosophy, science, mathematics. They're not separate. They're all integrated. And we brought rejuvenation would mean to bring in those connections.
The next one, to stimulate. And when you stimulate, one of the things that I've seen a lot happening lately is students are just passive. They sit there. Nobody learns passively. You may memorize a bunch of miscellaneous information that you really don't care about, and it goes away. Stimulate means I get you involved into the subject matter. I don't necessarily answer all your questions about it, but I make you involved. I may present stuff to you that you have to reach an answer. And I'm not going to ask you your answer, but I may ask you to justify how you're coming. But it's a stimulant. It makes it, you give excitement and meaning to the subject, rather than sit there kind of going, duh, 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 and you die, the poor student dies of boredom before they ever...
Well, actually, when you talk to me, that's what I hear a lot. I hear a lot
You know, we have something in common. I hear the same thing.
That's familiar to me now.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
understand
me
what
too.
you're doing. Okay.
Yeah.
The fifth one that we came up with was actually a theatrical term from classical Greek. It is Deus ex machina, which means the machine, God out of the machine. And it was really the idea that a lot of complex problems have unorthodox solutions through history. In science, in philosophy, they don't solve a problem in philosophy, which is really, once philosophy solves a problem, it becomes a science.
That's what the scientists say.
That's what we believe. Anyway, but the idea process in philosophy is to really come up with novel ideas that go off from the usual. The old, I know it's a phrase we don't like to use, but the paradigm shift idea from Thomas Kuhn, but we don't like to use that. We'll have a whole episode on the paradigm issue. But Deus ex machina is really that process by which unorthodox solutions, unusual solutions, solve complex problems.
And the final one, to tell the story. When I tell the story, I'm not going to just tell the story about the person who came with, which I will. There's stories involved in the authors and these, but also in a lot of issues, you may have modern issues in a philosophy and an ethics class, where the problems are still there. I'll give you a brief illustration. In the Iliad, how do you deal with anger? Yeah. What is Achilles' major issue? Often viewed as a hero. He doesn't believe he's heroic, he believes he's a coward. But one way to tell the story is, how do you deal with anger? How come anger can be so intoxicating? So you tell a story that's related to each one of the things that a student can identify with. And when you tell the story, students often ask, why is something a classic? Beautiful question.
Absolutely.
And the way to answer that is, it's a classic because it still tells you a story that you hear today.
And it modernizes. It brings it to relevancy and why are we taking this course?
Yeah.
And when you make those connections, that becomes rather critical.
And humanities, all of these things are about us.
Exactly.
They're humans. And a lot of us haven't changed that much in all that period of time. We still tell the same stories. We still rate them. Whether that story is Star Wars or something else, our current mythologies, we tell the same stories. And the question is not whether we do, which we do, but why are those so important to us?
And why do they go through time as they do? And they go on through time unchanged.
Yeah.
And even when there's a variation, it's still the rudiments of that story are the foundation. And that means there's significance there.
And the whole point, by putting these I-6 into a classroom, once you get it into the classroom, the whole point is to turn the students, they learn critical thinking, they're not passive learners, they become involved in it, rather than sitting there taking something, writing down a few, whether they get an A or a D, ultimately 30 years from now they may not remember, but they will remember why it was important to them to learn it at that point. That's what becomes the most important issue. Absolutely. And why this I-6 is so important.
The idea that now, having expressed the I-6, and let's just summarize them quickly: to animate, originate, rejuvenate, stimulate, deus ex machina, and tell a story.
Yeah.
Each new video that we do, the next few episodes will be devoted to 2 of these at a time to elaborate a little bit more. But the important thing we also should say is that we did these in like 30-second segments in the classroom.
Yeah,
so
we did them all time.
there was nothing about putting in curriculum things like this. We kind of did it naturally. We think a lot of teachers do this.
And
a lot of professors do this. And it's not a lost talent. It's just that we began to summarize.
And I think we're going to do the next 2. And one of the things when we go over each one of these, one thing every teacher should always ask themselves, I always ask myself, how many teachers have you had in your life versus how many do you remember? And why do you remember those you do and forget? And I will almost guarantee they use some version of this without articulating it in the way we did.
Exactly. That's what we found. The professors that were most memorable were the ones that either stressed us to a certain extent or had a character that emphasized one or more of these particular characteristics. And we couldn't identify it, but when we talked about it later on, we found that this was really part of the process. And we're interesting, before we do conclude, and that is, we found, when I taught philosophy, several philosophy students actually took physics as an elective, and several humanities students did the same, correct? And, and several physics students now took humanities in this context.
And that's, like I said, we want to get faculty members to look at this. You want to be the one they mention 20 years from now.
That's right.
Not the one they cannot.
And that's the whole goal.
That's
whole
the goal.
Shape Shifters is really that goal.
Of the I6. The goal of the I6 and of Shape Shifters is to become that. Not just for your own ego, but so that the student remembered means they remembered stuff about that class.
Well, they're going to remember you no matter what. I mean,
well, of course they would. I'm not
because
normal.
you're basically, what was the student used to say? You were 2 clicks from 25 to life.
Well, they called me Mephistopheles.
That's correct. How many times have you been married, by the way?
Just once.
Oh, I don't believe that at all.
No, I've been married 5 times.
How many?
5.
Make sure you said 5. I think it's 8.
Well, that's because you're a mathematician. You can't count.
You're good. I can tell you
you're
right
good
now,
at math. You're bad at arithmetic.
8 is more the idea. However, the next video will be based on 2. So the first 2 will be animate and to originate.
Yeah.
And we're going to focus on those 2.
And when we look at them, I'm going to go over, when we look at both of them, we'll go into some detail of them. How to originate. We'll give you suggestions on how you can take a subject matter, bring it into the classroom, and sometimes by doing no more than asking a question. Not just putting stuff up, just start off with a set of questions, a set of things for the student to do. And to animate. Don't sit there in front of a podium boring yourself and everybody else to death.
Talking head
Become alive. Do something. You know,
it's really bring to life.
Yeah.
Each of these 2, animate and to originate, bring to life the content, which really makes the student want to learn more, and they learn more on their own, and they will actually ask us, as we talked about this early on. They ask us, can you go further into the topic when time was available?
And that's why you don't need an assessment to see if you're successful.
Next video is going to be a lot of fun.
Okay.
And we'll bring out all these ideas that we did and emphasize some of the techniques.
Right.
And methodologies that we employed.
And one of the purposes, I'd love everybody, particularly a faculty member, looks at this to become a successful teacher. Successful means add 2 things. That student is interested and asks questions later, and the best, your top students supersede you at some point.
Yes.
To go there.
Exactly. The whole idea that a student supersedes you, we used to say, would be the idea that we became inconsequential, and when we did that, we had we've been successful.
Yeah. And
when they became our teacher, that was our goal.
And when we're going to talk about originate, when you do the originate, one of the things to make them that is to show them that original idea, how it came about, but not just the history, how even they at some point in their life have probably conceived of these. At some point they've seen it in stories, they've seen it in everything else. And when you originate that, when you bring that out, when you show them how it's not something far away by another culture or another person, you now can animate that with the best.
Yeah, we often brought this up, that there's a kind of cultural amnesia where students think that this is brand new, when really its origins are pretty far down. But the strand, the tentacle through time and through history is amazing. And when they see it for the first time, they begin to make their own connections.
Okay, Tony, you're out of time. You're yapping too much.
Well, I learned this. I learned this because it's my fault, because I was your teacher, and I should have learned.
You're one of the ones I didn't forget. Sorry to say it.
Not only that,
I didn't forget you. I didn't forget you.
I know.
That's not always a plus thing. I got to say that.
It's the worst thing that I've ever done, because you followed me around, and it's been horrible. And,
yeah, that was both our mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. and even our producer today is a former student of ours, and we can't lose him.
Now he's bossing us around.
Now
I guess we were successful.
Exactly. What do we give him? A clapperboard.
Big
mistake.
Yeah. Well, we can't win them all.
Yeah.
We can't win them all.
Well, that concludes our first video on S.H.A.P.E Shorts.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.